The United States Navy has 11 aircraft carriers. It is required by federal law to maintain at least 11. For 70 years, this number has been the defining symbol of American naval supremacy. 11 carrier strike groups, 11 floating airfields, 11 mobile expressions of the ability to project lethal force to any ocean on Earth within days. China had 0 aircraft carriers in 2012. It had 1 in 2015. It had 2 in 2020. It has 3 today. And in December 2025, the United States Department of Defense revealed that China has revised its carrier expansion plan upward, not to 7, not to 8, to 9 aircraft carriers by 2035. 6 of those will be the Type 004 class, nuclear-powered, 110,000 to 120,000 tons displacement, larger than the USS Gerald R. Ford, currently the most powerful warship ever built, capable of carrying 90 to 100 aircraft. Sea trials projected for 2028 to 2029. That is one new carrier launched approximately every 20 months between now and 2035. The United States has one shipyard capable of building nuclear-powered aircraft carriers. 1. Newport News Shipbuilding in Virginia. It is currently building 2 Gerald R. Year Ford-class carriers simultaneously and has a multi-year backlog of submarine construction orders that competes for the same labor, materials, and dock space. The gap between these two industrial realities is not a future problem, it is a present structural fact. And understanding what it means requires looking not at the ships themselves, but at the shipbuilding capacity behind them. Because in the history of naval warfare, the country that controls the shipyard always eventually controls the sea. I want to walk you through the game theory, the structural history, and the specific production math that explains why the carrier count gap matters more than any individual ship specification. Hit subscribe if you are learning something here. We have a lot of ground to cover today. Let me start with the number that the mainstream coverage consistently buries in the middle of every article about Chinese naval power, because it is the most important single data point in this story. China's shipbuilding output by gross tonnage is currently approximately 5 times larger than the United States. 5 times, not 50% more, not twice as much, 5 times. In 2023, China produced 55% of all civilian vessels built globally, measured by gross tonnage. The United States produced less than 1%. This is not a military statistic, it is a commercial statistic. But military shipbuilding and commercial shipbuilding draw from the same industrial base, the same steel, the same welding workforce, the same engineering supply chains, the same port infrastructure, the same modular construction techniques. China's 2 primary carrier yards, Jiangnan Shipyard in Shanghai and Dalian Shipbuilding Industry Company in Liaoning, have already built 2 complete carriers from scratch. Jiangnan completed the Type 003 carrier Fujian using modern modular construction techniques that significantly compress timelines compared to traditional sequential assembly. Satellite imagery from April 2026 shows Dalian's construction of the Type 004 progressing at a pace that multiple independent analysts describe as faster than expected. The United States built aircraft carriers slowly. The USS Gerald R. Ford was ordered in 2008. It was commissioned in 2017, 9 years from order to commissioning. The USS John F. Kennedy, its successor, was laid down in 2015. It is not yet commissioned. The USS Enterprise, the 3rd Ford-class carrier, is under construction with a projected commissioning date in the early 2030s. American carrier construction is slow, not because American engineers are less capable, but because Newport News is operating at maximum capacity with insufficient shipyard infrastructure to do more than it is currently doing. This is the first structural force, the production asymmetry. Keep the 5-to-1 shipbuilding ratio in the back of your mind because we are coming back to it. The second structural force is what I call the carrier arithmetic. The United States has 11 aircraft carriers, but the Pacific Fleet has 6. The Atlantic Fleet maintains the other 5, covering commitments in Europe, the Mediterranean, and the broader Atlantic. If a crisis erupts in the Pacific, the United States can surge additional carriers from the Atlantic. But surging carriers from one ocean to another takes time. Weeks of transit. And during those weeks, the United States must manage the risk that a crisis in one theater escalates while assets are in transit to another. China is building 9 carriers. All 9 are intended for the Indo-Pacific theater. not split between two oceans, not maintaining commitments in the Atlantic and Mediterranean, focused on a single operational theater that China considers its primary strategic priority. By 2035, China's plan produces 9 carriers in the Pacific theater. The United States permanently stations 6 in the Pacific, with the ability to surge additional assets at the cost of Atlantic and Mediterranean coverage. The numerical balance in the Pacific, which has always been decisively in America's favor, is projected to be roughly equal by 2035 and to tip in China's favor shortly thereafter. The carrier arithmetic also has a second dimension that the headline count misses. The United States must maintain global commitments simultaneously. During the Iran War, 2 carrier strike groups have been committed to the Persian Gulf and Gulf of Oman. That is 2 of the Pacific Fleet's 6 carriers operating in a theater that is not the Pacific. While those carriers are in the Gulf, they are not available to respond to a Taiwan Strait incident. Not immediately, not quickly. China's planners are watching this. The Iran War has provided Beijing with a real-world demonstration of how American carrier commitments in one theater create windows of reduced coverage in another. Numbers are not the only measure of naval power. The United States has 7 decades of carrier aviation experience to China's 14 years. American carrier pilots are the best trained in the world. American carrier strike group integration, the coordination of submarines, destroyers, aircraft, logistics ships, and intelligence assets around a carrier is a capability China is still learning. These are real advantages. They are also advantages that close with time and practice, not ones that remain fixed. Now I want to go deeper, because this is where most people's analysis completely breaks down. The third structural force is the pilot problem. And this is the dimension of China's carrier program that the count-focused analysis almost always misses. Operating an aircraft carrier at full combat effectiveness requires carrier-qualified pilots. Not just pilots, carrier-qualified pilots. Pilots trained to land a high-performance aircraft on a 300-meter deck moving through the ocean, often at night, often in poor weather, using a tailhook to catch an arresting wire in a fraction of a second. This is the most demanding aviator qualification in the world. The United States Navy has been training carrier pilots since 1922. It has a century of accumulated technique, training methodology, and institutional knowledge. China commissioned its first catapult-capable carrier, the Fujian, in late 2024. Catapult-assisted takeoff and arrested recovery, the system that maximizes the weight and range of aircraft a carrier can operate, requires a specific and very demanding set of pilot skills. China's carrier pilot training pipeline is at most a decade old. Its pilots have been learning on ski jump carriers, which are significantly easier to operate from, but produce less capable air wings. China commissioned its first catapult-capable carrier, the Fujian, in late 2024. Catapult-assisted takeoff and arrested recovery, the system that maximizes the weight and range of aircraft a carrier can operate, requires a specific and very demanding set of pilot skills. China's carrier pilot training pipeline is at most a decade old. Its pilots have been learning on ski jump carriers, which are significantly easier to operate from but produce less capable air wings. The numbers are stark. The United States Navy has approximately 2,500 carrier-qualified pilots across its 11 air wings. That workforce took decades to build. China, with 3 carriers and expanding, is building its carrier pilot cadre from a standing start. The Fujian alone, with its catapult system, requires a training pipeline that did not exist in China until approximately 2024. Training a carrier pilot from initial aviation training to carrier qualification takes a minimum of 3 to 4 years under the most aggressive programs. Training enough pilots for 6 Type 004 air wings, each requiring 60 to 90 qualified aviators, by 2035 is an extremely aggressive timeline even by Chinese institutional standards. The Type 004 will require catapult-qualified pilots. Producing them in sufficient numbers for 9 carrier air wings by 2035 is the single most demanding human capital challenge in China's entire naval expansion program. This is not an insurmountable problem. It is a real constraint on the effective combat power of the fleet, even if the ships themselves are built on schedule. Think about what this means for the military families on both sides of this competition. American naval aviator families have sons and daughters who have spent years training for the most demanding aviation qualification in the world. That training produces an advantage. The question is whether the advantage persists as China's training pipeline matures. Chinese families whose children are entering the carrier pilot program today are part of a generation that will determine whether the fleet that is being built has the human infrastructure to make it operationally effective. Most analysts who challenge the 9-carrier target focus on this pilot problem and on the nuclear propulsion challenge. Both are real, and they completely miss the structural logic of China's approach. Here is the reality. China does not need all 9 carriers to be simultaneously operating at American combat effectiveness levels in 2035 to achieve its primary strategic objective. China's primary strategic objective with the carrier program is not to defeat the United States Navy in a high-intensity blue water engagement. It is to raise the cost of American intervention in a Taiwan or South China Sea scenario to the point where American decision-makers calculate that intervention is too risky to commit to. Even a partially capable carrier that can conduct sustained air operations in the Philippine Sea complicates the math for an American carrier strike group that would have to operate within range of that carrier's air wing, plus China's land-based anti-access systems, plus China's submarine force, plus China's hypersonic missile arsenal. The carriers do not need to win a battle. They need to expand the zone within which American planners must account for Chinese air power. And that expansion happens with every additional carrier that becomes operational, even if that carrier operates at 60% of American effectiveness rather than 100%. The historical parallel that illuminates this trajectory most clearly is the Japanese naval program of the 1920s and 1930s. After the Washington Naval Treaty of 1922, Japan was constrained to a 3-to-5 ratio of capital ships relative to the United States and Britain. Japanese naval planners, furious at this constraint, responded with a program of qualitative superiority rather than quantitative parity. They invested in night fighting training, in long-range torpedoes, in carrier aviation, in technologies where quantity was less important than technique. By 1941, the Imperial Japanese Navy had developed the most capable carrier aviation force in the world, with pilots whose skill level genuinely exceeded that of their American counterparts. They demonstrated this at Pearl Harbor and in the early Pacific campaigns. The United States recovered from that initial advantage through one mechanism: industrial production. American shipyards built carriers faster than Japan could sink them. The Essex-class carrier program produced 24 fleet carriers between 1942 and 1950. Japan could not match that production rate, regardless of the skill of its aviators. By 1944, the United States had quantitative and qualitative superiority simultaneously. The parallel to 2026 is not that China is Japan. The parallel is that the country with the larger industrial base has historically been able to close initial qualitative gaps faster than the country with superior technique can maintain them. China's shipbuilding base is the largest industrial foundation for naval expansion in human history. Its quality gaps in carrier aviation are real today. They are also closing, and the production math strongly favors the country with 5 times the shipbuilding output. Watch 4 things in the coming years. The first thing to watch is the Type 004 launch date. Satellite imagery suggests construction is tracking toward a launch in 2028, with sea trials extending into 2029. The transition from construction to sea trials is the point at which independent analysts can assess the nuclear propulsion system, the catapult configuration, and the air wing integration for the first time. If the Type 004 meets its projected timeline, it validates China's modular construction capacity and gives Beijing a proof of concept for the subsequent 5 Type 004 carriers. If it slips significantly, the 9 by 2035 target becomes much less credible. The second thing to watch is the American shipyard investment. Congress has debated supplemental funding for Newport News capacity expansion for several years without producing significant results. The Pentagon's 2026 shipbuilding plan acknowledges the capacity gap but does not propose a solution that would dramatically accelerate carrier production timelines. Watch whether the carrier count comparison produces enough political urgency to fund a genuine expansion of American nuclear carrier production capacity. If it does not, the gap grows with time rather than closing. The third thing to watch is China's carrier-qualified pilot numbers. China's state media has been increasingly transparent about carrier aviation training, which is itself a signal of confidence in the program's progress. Watch for announcements about expanded carrier pilot training bases, night landing qualifications, and catapult qualification programs. The rate at which China produces catapult-qualified carrier pilots is the leading indicator of how quickly the 9-carrier fleet translates into 9 operationally effective carrier strike groups. The fourth thing to watch is the escort fleet. A carrier strike group is not just a carrier, it is a carrier surrounded by destroyers, frigates, submarines, and logistics vessels that provide air defense, anti-submarine warfare, and sustainment. China has been commissioning Type 055 destroyers, the most capable surface combatants in its fleet, at a rate that supports carrier strike group formation. Watch whether the escort fleet expansion tracks the carrier expansion or falls behind. A carrier without escorts is a vulnerability, not a strength. The pace of Chinese escort commissioning will tell you whether the carrier program is being built as a genuinely integrated strike group capability or as a count-based deterrent. The structural conclusion from all of this is precise. By 2035, based on the Pentagon's own assessment, China will have 9 aircraft carriers in the Indo-Pacific theater. The United States permanently stations 6 in the Pacific. The qualitative advantages that the United States holds in pilot experience, in strike group integration, and nuclear propulsion operational history are real. They are also eroding as China's training pipeline matures and its operational experience accumulates. The industrial production gap, 5-to-1 in China's favor, means that the quantitative deficit closes faster than any qualitative advantage can offset it. The United States has never in its modern history faced a naval competitor with a comparable industrial base. The Soviet Union had a large navy but never approached American shipbuilding capacity. Japan came closer in the 1930s and lost the industrial competition decisively by 1943. China in 2026 presents a genuinely different structural challenge, not because its carriers are currently more capable, because the factory behind the carriers is larger than anything the United States has faced since it became a naval power. This is not prophecy. This is structural history combined with game theory. I might be wrong about whether China achieves the 9-carrier target by 2035, or whether it slips to 2038 or 2040. I might be wrong about whether the pilot and nuclear propulsion challenges slow the program more than current trajectories suggest. If I am wrong, we will come back and analyze why. Save this analysis, come back in 2028. Check whether the Type 004 has launched. Check whether Congress has funded Newport News expansion. Check whether China's carrier pilot training has produced enough catapult-qualified aviators for 2 full air wings. The answers will tell you whether the carrier gap is closing on the timeline the Pentagon projects, or whether one side has solved the key constraint that changes the math. Subscribe if you want to follow this as it develops, because the story of whether the United States or China commands the Pacific Ocean in the 2030s is being written right now in a dry dock in Dalian and in the budget negotiations of the United States Congress. And only one of those 2 institutions is currently operating at the scale the competition requires.